Hello, and welcome back, everyone, to Michael Reads, where timeless books build modern lives. Every time we gather together, um, we do far more than simply read another chapter of a great book. We also invest in ourselves. Um, it's been a wonderful day. I hope you've all been good. And I'm just setting everything up, just making sure all is well, all is good for this live stream. Um, every page we turn has the power to reshape the way we think, strengthen the habits we build, and influence the decisions that shape our future. Tonight, uh, we make one final journey through the magnificent city of Babylon, where wisdom has endured for thousands of years, continues to guide those who seek lasting success, financial freedom, and a life built upon purpose rather than chance. Whether you're joining us live or listening back at a later date, thank you for choosing to spend your day here. There are countless ways to pass the time, but you've chosen to invest yours in learning, and that is a decision that will always pay dividends. I'm truly grateful to have you here, and I hope tonight's reading leaves you with something valuable that stays with you long after the stream has ended. And before we begin, I'd like to ask a small favor. If you believe that wisdom found within great books deserves to be shared rather than forgotten, please take a moment to support Michael Reads by subscribing to the channel, liking the live stream, and sharing it with someone who would benefit from these timeless lessons. Every person who joins this community helps keep these extraordinary books alive for future generations, and together we're creating a place where anyone anywhere in the world can return whenever they need guidance, encouragement, or simply a reminder that success begins with learning. Now, make yourself comfortable, take a deep breath, and leave the distractions of the day behind. Together, let's return once more to the ancient streets of Babylon. As we reach the 10th chapter, and it's the final chapter of The Richest Man in Babylon, we arrive at a story that explores one of the most misunderstood ideas in both wealth and life itself, the idea of luck. Throughout history, many people often looked at successful individuals and concluded that they were simply fortunate, that somehow life smiled upon them while others were waiting for their own opportunity. It is an easy explanation because it removes responsibility from ourselves, allowing us to believe that success belongs only to those who happen to be in the right place at the right time. George Clason challenges that belief completely. Instead of portraying luck as an unpredictable force that randomly chooses its favorites, he invites us to look much deeper. He encourages us to consider whether what we often call luck is actually something that can be influenced by our own choices, our preparation, and our willingness to act when opportunity quietly appears before us. This chapter serves as the perfect conclusion to the entire book because it brings together every principle we have learned throughout our journey in Babylon. We have discovered the importance of paying ourselves first, making our money work for us, protecting our wealth from unnecessary risk, seeking advice from those who with experience, increasing our ability to earn, and taking full responsibility of our financial future. Now we are shown how all of these habits combine to create that what others often mistake as good fortune. As you listen to tonight's reading, I encourage you to think beyond the words on the page. Ask yourself whether opportunities have ever appeared in your own life that you have hesitated to pursue. Reflect on the moments where fear, uncertainty, or procrastination may have quietly closed doors that were once open before you. Equally, consider the times when taking action, even if it felt uncomfortable, led to outcomes that others later described as lucky. You may begin to realize that luck has far less to do with chance than most people believe. This chapter isn't simply about becoming wealthier, it is about developing the mindset that allows opportunity to recognize you. It teaches us that fortune often rewards those who are prepared, decisive, and willing to act while others remain frozen by indecision. If we can understand that lesson, then perhaps we can stop waiting for luck to arrive and instead begin creating the conditions that allow it to find us. With that in mind, let's open the final chapter of The Richest Man in Babylon. This is chapter 10, The Luckiest Man in Babylon. At the head of his caravan proudly rode Shahrunada, the merchant prince of Babylon. He liked fine cloth and wore rich and becoming robes. He liked fine animals and sat effortlessly on his spirited Arabian stallion. If you looked at him, have guessed that you could hardly have guessed that he was old. You certainly would not have suspected he was troubled. The journey from Damascus is long and there are many hardships in the desert, but he didn't mind. The Arab tribes are fierce and eager to loot rich caravans. He didn't fear them because he had many mounted guards that gave him protection. His trouble was caused by the young man at his side, who he was bringing from Damascus. His name was Hadan Gula, the grandson of his partner from years past, Arad Gula, to whom he felt he owed a debt of gratitude which he could never repay. He wanted to do something for his grandson, but the more he considered it, the more difficult it seemed because of the boy himself. Eyeing the young man's rings and earrings, he thought to himself, he thinks jewels are for men, but he has his grandfather's strong face. But his grandfather didn't wear such gaudy robes. But I asked him to come, hoping that I might help him get a head start for himself and get away from the wreck his father had made of their inheritance. Hadan Gula broke in on his thoughts. Why do you work so hard, always riding with your caravan on these long journeys? Do you never take time to enjoy life? Shahrunada smiled. To enjoy life? He repeated. What would you do to enjoy life if you were me? If I had wealth equal to yours, I would live like a prince. I would never ride across the hot desert. I would spend the shekels as fast as they came into my purse. I would wear the richest robes and the rarest jewels. That would be a life to me, a life worth living. Both men laughed. Your grandfather didn't wear jewels, Shahrunada spoke before he thought, then continued jokingly. Would you have no time to work? Work was made for slaves, Hadan Gula responded. Shahrunada bit his lip and made no reply, riding in silence until the trail led them to the slope. Here he tied up his horse and pointed to the green valley far in the distance. Look, there is the valley. Look far down and you can barely see the walls of Babylon. The Tower of the temple of Baal. If your eyes are sharp, you might even be able to see the smoke from the eternal fire on its crest. So that is Babylon. I have always wanted to see the wealthiest city in all the world, Hadan Gula commented. Babylon, where my grandfather started his fortune. If he were still alive today, he wouldn't be in this situation. Why would you wish for his spirit to linger on earth past its allotted time? You and your father can carry on his good work. Unfortunately, neither of us has his gift. Father and I don't know his secret for attracting the golden shekels. Sharonada did not reply but rode thoughtfully down the trail to the valley. Behind them followed the caravan in a cloud of reddish dust. After some time, they reached the king's highway and turned south through the irrigated farms. 3 old men plowing a field caught Sharonada's attention. They seemed strangely familiar. How ridiculous! One doesn't pass a field after 40 years and find the same men plowing there. But something within him said they were the same men. One held the plow with an uncertain grip. The others laboriously plodded beside the oxen, beating them with their barrel staves to keep them pulling. 40 years ago, he had envied these men. How gladly he would have exchanged places. But what a difference now. He looked back at his trailing caravan, well-chosen camels and donkeys with pride. They were loaded with valuable goods from Damascus. All of this was only one of his possessions. He pointed to the plowers, saying, "They are still plowing the same field they were 40 years ago. They look like it, but why would you think they are the same?" "I saw them there," Sharonada replied. Memories were racing through his mind. They couldn't. Why couldn't he bury the past and live in the present? Then he saw, as in a picture, the smiling face of Arad Gula. The barrier between himself and the cynical youth beside him dissolved. But how could he help such an arrogant youth with his spendthrift ideas and bejeweled hands? He had plenty of work he could offer to willing workers, but he didn't have any for men who considered themselves too good for work. But he owed it to Arad Gula to do something, and certainly not a half-hearted attempt. He and Arad Gula had never done things that way. They were not that sort of men. A plan came to him almost in a flash. There were objections. He must consider his own family and his own standing. It would be cruel. It would hurt. Being a man of quick decisions, he dismissed his objections and decided to act. "Would you be interested in hearing how your grandfather and I started our partnership that proved to be so profitable?" he questioned. "Why don't you just tell me how you made the golden shekels? That is all I need to know," the young man parried. Sharonada ignored the reply and continued, "My story begins with those men plowing. I was no older than you are now. As the column of men that I marched with approached, good old Megiddo the farmer scoffed at the half-hearted way that they plowed. Megiddo was chained next to me. "Look at those lazy fellows," he protested. "The plow holder makes no effort to plow deep, and the beaters don't keep the oxen in a straight line. How can they expect to raise a good crop with their poor plowing?" "Did you say Megiddo was chained to you?" Hadan Gula asked in surprise. "Yes, with bronze collars around our necks and a heavy chain between us. Next to him was Zabado, the sheep thief. I had known him in Harund. At the end was a man we called Pirate because he did not tell us his name. We guessed he was a sailor because he had entwined serpents tattooed on his chest, which is sailor fashion. The column was made up so that the men could walk in fours. You were chained as a slave? Hadangula asked incredulously. Didn't your grandfather tell you I was once a slave? He often spoke of you, but never hinted you were a slave. He was a man you could trust with your innermost secrets. You too are a man I can trust. Am I right? Sharunada looked him square in the eye. You can rely on my silence, but I am amazed. Tell me how you became a slave. Sharunada shrugged his shoulders. Any man can find himself as a slave. It was a gaming house and barley beer that brought me disaster. I was the victim of my brother's bad decisions. In a brawl, he killed his friend. I was bonded to the widow by my father, desperate to keep my brother from being prosecuted under the law. When my father could not raise the silver to free me, she, in her anger, sold me to the slave dealer. What a shame and injustice, Hadamgula protested. But tell me, how did you regain your freedom? We will get to that, but not yet. Let's continue my tale. As we passed, the plowers jeered at us. One took off his ragged hat and bowed low, calling out, "Welcome to Babylon, guests of the king. He is waiting for you at the city wall, where the banquet is spread, mud bricks and onion soup." There was an uproar of farmer laughter. Pirate flew into a rage and cursed them bitterly. What did those men mean when they said the king was waiting for us on the walls? I asked them. To the city walls you march and carry bricks until your back breaks. Maybe they beat you to death before it breaks. They won't beat me. I'll kill them. Then Megiddo spoke up. It doesn't make sense to me to talk about masters beating willing, hard-working slaves to death. Masters like good slaves and treat them well. Who wants to work hard? Commented Zabado. Those plowers are wise fellows. They are not breaking their backs, just pretending as if they are. You can't get ahead by shirking, Megiddo protested. If you plow a hectare, that is a good day's work, and if any master knows it. But when you plow only half, that's shirking. I don't shirk. I like to work, and I like to do good work because work is the best friend I've ever known. It has brought me all the good things I've had, my farm and cows and crops, everything. Yay, and where are these things now? Scoffed Zabado. I figure it pays better to be smart and get by without working. You watch, Zabado. If I were sold to the walls, I'll be carrying the water bag or some easy job when you, who like to work, will be breaking your backs carrying bricks. He laughed his silly laugh. Terror gripped me that night. I could not sleep. I crowded close to the guard rope, and while the others slept, I attracted the attention of Godoso, who was doing the first guard watch. He was one of those marauding Arabs, the sort of rogue who, if he robbed you of your purse, would think he must also cut your throat. Tell me, Godoso, I whispered, when do we get to Babylon? Will we be sold to the walls? Why do you want to know? He questioned cautiously. Can't you understand? I pleaded. I am young. I want to live. I don't want to be worked or beaten to death on the walls. Is there any chance for me to get a good master? He whispered back, I'll tell you something. You're a good fellow. Give Godoso no trouble. Most times we go first to slave market. Listen now. When buyer come, tell you good worker. Like to work hard for good master. Make 'em want to buy. You not make 'em buy. Next day you carry brick. Mighty hard work. After he walked away, I lay in the warm sand looking up at the stars and thinking about work. What Megiddo had said about it being his best friend made me wonder if he would be my best friend. Certainly, it would be if it helped me out of this. When Megiddo awoke, I whispered my good news to him. It was our one ray of hope as we marched towards Babylon. Late in the afternoon, we approached the walls and could see lines of men, like black ants, climbing up and down the steep diagonal paths. As we drew closer, we were amazed at the thousands of men working. Some were digging in the moat, others mixed the dirt into mud bricks. The greatest number were carrying the bricks in large baskets up those steep trails to the masons. The famous works of ancient Babylon, its walls, temples, hanging gardens, and great canals were built by slave labor, mainly prisoners of war, which explains the inhuman treatment they received. This force of workmen also included many citizens of Babylon and its provinces who had been sold into slavery because of crimes or financial troubles. It was a common custom for men to put themselves, their wives, or their children up as a bond to guarantee payment of loans, legal judgments, or other obligations. In case of default, those so bonded were sold into slavery. The overseers cursed the laggards and cracked bullock whips over the backs of those who failed to keep in line. Poor, worn-out fellows were seen to stagger and fall beneath their heavy baskets, unable to rise again. If the whip failed to bring them to their feet, they were pushed to the side of the path and left writhing in agony. Soon they would be dragged down to join other broken bodies beside the roadway to await unsanctified graves. As I beheld the ghastly sight, I shuddered. So this was what awaited my father's son if he failed at the slave market. Cardoso had been right. We were taken through the gates of the city to the slave prison, and the next morning marched to the pens in the market. Here the rest of the men huddled in fear, and only the whips of our guards could keep them moving so the buyers could examine them. Megiddo and myself eagerly talked to every man who allowed us to address him. The slave dealer brought soldiers from the king's guard who shackled pirate and brutally beat him when he protested. As they led him away, I felt sorry for him. Megiddo felt that we would soon part ways. When no buyers were near, he talked to me earnestly to impress on me how valuable work would be to me in the future. Some men hate it. They make it their enemy. Better to treat it like a friend. Make yourself like it. Don't complain because it is hard. If you think about what a good house you built, then who cares if the beams are heavy? And it is far away from the well to carry the water for the plaster. Promise me, boy, if you get a master, work for him as hard as you can. If he does not appreciate all you do, never mind. Remember, work well done does good to the man who does it. It makes him a better man. He stopped as a burly farmer came to the enclosure and looked at us critically. Megiddo asked about his farm and crops and soon convinced him that he would be a valuable man. After violent bargaining with the slave dealer, the farmer pulled out a fat purse from beneath his robe, and soon Megiddo had followed his new master out of sight. A few other men were sold during the morning. At noon, Godoso told me that the dealer was disgusted and would not stay another night, but would take all who remained at sundown to the king's buyer. I was becoming desperate when a plump, good-natured man walked up to the wall and asked if there was a baker in our group. I approached him saying, "Why would a good baker like yourself want a baker with bad habits? Wouldn't it be easier to teach a willing man like myself your skilled ways? Look at me. I am young, strong, and like to work. Give me a chance, and I will do my best to earn gold and silver for your purse." He was impressed by my willingness and began bargaining with the dealer, who had never noticed me since he bought me, but now spoke eloquently about my abilities, good health, and good disposition. I felt like a fat ox being sold to a butcher. I followed the new master away, thinking I was the luckiest man in Babylon. I really liked my new home. Nananade, my master, taught me how to grind the barley in a stone bowl and stood in the courtyard, how to build a fire in the oven, and then how to grind very fine sesame flour for honey cakes. I had a couch in the shed where his grain was stored. The old slave housekeeper Swasti fed me well and was pleased at the way I helped her with the heavy tasks. Here was the chance I was waiting for to make myself valuable to my master, and I hoped to find a way to earn my freedom. I asked Nananade to show me how to knead the bread and to bake. He did and was very pleased with my willingness to learn. Later, when I could do this well, I asked him to show me how to make the honey cakes, and soon I was doing all the baking. My master was glad to be idle, but Swasti shook her head in disapproval. No work to do for no work to do is bad for any man, she declared. I felt like it was time for me to think of a way I could earn coins to buy my freedom. As the baking was finished at noon, I thought Nananade would approve if I found profitable employment for the afternoons and might share in the earnings with me. Then the thought came to me, why not bake more of the honey cakes and peddle them to the hungry men on the streets of the city? I presented my plan to Nananade this way. If I can use my afternoons after the baking is finished to earn more coins for you, wouldn't it be fair if you share my earnings with me so I can have money of my own to spend on those things that every man desires and needs? Fair enough, he admitted. When I told him of my plan to peddle our honey cakes, he was well pleased. Here is what we will do, he suggested. You sell them at 2 for a penny. Then half of the pennies will be mine to pay for the flour and the honey and the wood to bake them. The rest I'll take half and you have the other half. I was very pleased by his generous offer that I could keep 1/4 of my sales. That night I worked late to make a tray to display the cakes. Nananade gave me one of his worn robes so I could look good, and Swasti helped me patch it and wash it clean. The next day I baked an extra supply of honey cakes. They looked brown and tempting on a tray as I went along the street, loudly calling out my wares. At first no one seemed interested, and I became discouraged. I kept going on, and later in the afternoon, as men became hungry, the cakes began to sell and soon my tray was empty. Nananade was well pleased with my success and gladly paid me my share. I was delighted to own pennies. Megiddo had been right when he said a master appreciated good work from his slaves. That night I was so excited over my success I could hardly sleep and tried to figure out how much I could earn in a year and how many years it would take me to buy my freedom. As I went out with my tray of cakes every day, I soon found regular customers. One of these men was none other than your grandfather, Arid Gula. He was a rug merchant and sold to the housewives, going from one end of the city to the other, accompanied by a donkey loaded high with rugs and a slave to tend it. He would buy 2 cakes for himself and 2 for his slave, always wanting to talk with me while they ate them. Your grandfather said something to me one day that I will always remember. I like your cakes, boy, but I like your fine enterprise even more. Spirit like that can carry you far on the road to success. But how can you understand, Hadan Gula, what such words of encouragement could mean to a slave boy lonely in a great city, struggling with all he had in him to find a way out of his humiliation? As the months went by, I continued to add pennies to my purse. It began to be a comforting weight on my belt. Work was proving to be my best friend, just as Megiddo had said. I was happy but Swasti was worried. Your master, I'm worried. He's spending too much time at the gaming houses, she protested. I was overjoyed one day to meet my friend Megiddo on the street. He was leading 3 donkeys loaded with vegetables to the market. I am doing mighty well, he said. My master appreciates my good work and has made me a foreman. Look, he trusts the selling to me and he is sending for my family. Work is helping me to recover from my great trouble. Someday it will help me buy my freedom and once again own a farm of my own. Time went on and Nana Nade became more and more anxious for me to return from selling. He would be waiting when I returned and would eagerly count and divide our money. He would also urge me to look for more markets and increase my sales. I often went outside the city gates to sell to the overseers of the slaves building the walls. I hated to return to the terrible sight, but I found that the overseers were great customers. One day I was surprised to see Zabado waiting in line to fill his basket with bricks. He was gaunt and bent, and his back was covered with welts and sores from the whips of the overseers. I was sorry for him and handed him a cake, which he crushed into his mouth like a hungry animal. Seeing the greedy look in his eyes, I ran before he could grab my tray. Why do you work so hard? Arad Gula said to me one day. Almost the same question you asked me today. Do you remember? I told him what Megiddo said about work and how it was proving to be my best friend. I showed him my wallet of pennies with pride and explained how I was saving them to buy my freedom. When you are free, what will you do? He inquired. Then I answered, I plan on becoming a merchant. It was then he confided in me, something I had never suspected. You don't know this, but I am also a slave. I am in partnership with my master. Stop, demanded Hadan Gula. I will not listen to lies defaming my grandfather. He was no slave. His eyes blazed in anger. Sharonada remained calm. I respected him for rising above his misfortune and becoming a leading citizen of Damascus. Aren't you his grandson, cast from the same mold? Aren't you man enough to face true facts? Or do you prefer to live under false illusions? Hadangula straightened in his saddle. In a voice suppressed with deep emotion, he replied, "My grandfather was beloved by all. His good deeds were countless. When the famine came, didn't he use the gold to buy grain in Egypt? And didn't his caravan bring it to Damascus and distribute it to the people so no one would starve? Now you say he was just a despised slave in Babylon? If he had remained a slave in Babylon, then he might have been despised. But when, through his own efforts, he became a great man in Damascus, the gods condoned his misfortunes and honored him with their respect." Sharunada replied. After telling me that he was a slave, Sharunada continued. He explained how anxious he had been to earn his freedom. Now he had enough money to buy it. He couldn't decide what he should do. He was no longer making good sales and was scared to leave the support of his master. I protested his indecision. Don't cling any longer to your master. Get the feeling of being a free man once again. Act like a free man and succeed like one. Decide what you want to accomplish, and then work will help you to achieve it. He went on his way saying he was glad I had shamed him for his cowardice. Slave customs in ancient Babylon, though they may seem inconsistent to us, were strictly regulated by law. For example, a slave could own property of any kind, even other slaves on which his master had no claim. Slaves intermarried freely with non-slaves. Children of free mothers were free. Most of the city merchants were slaves. Many of these were in partnership with their masters and wealthy in their own right. One day I went outside the gates again, and I was surprised to find a big crowd gathering. When I asked a man what was going on, he replied, "Have you not heard? An escaped slave who murdered one of the king's guards has been brought to justice and will be flogged to death for his crime. Even the king himself will be here." The crowd around the flogging post was so dense I was scared to get any closer because I was worried my cakes would get knocked over. So I climbed up the unfinished wall to see other people's heads. I was fortunate to have a view of Nebuchadnezzar himself as he rode by in his golden chariot. I had never seen such grandeur, such robes and hanging gold cloth and velvet. I could not see the flogging, but I could hear the shrieks of the poor slave. I wondered how someone as noble as our handsome king could stand to see such suffering, but when I saw he was laughing and joking with his nobles, I knew he was cruel, and finally I understood why such inhuman tasks were demanded of the slaves building the walls. After the slave was dead, his body was hung on a pole by a rope attached to his legs so that everyone could see. As the crowd began to thin, I went close. On the hairy chest I saw tattooed two entwined serpents. It was pirate. The next time I met Arad Gula, he was a changed man. Full of enthusiasm, he greeted me. "Behold, the slave you knew is now a free man." There was magic in your words. Already my sales and my profits are increasing. My wife is overjoyed. She was a free woman, the niece of my master. She really wants to move to a strange city where no one knows that I was once a slave. So our children will be above reproach for their father's misfortune. Work has become my best helper. It has allowed me to recapture my confidence and my skill to sell. I was overjoyed that I had been able, even in a small way, to repay him for his encouragement he had given me. One evening, Swasti came to me greatly distressed. Your master is in trouble. I am afraid for him. A couple of months ago, he lost a lot of money at the gaming tables. He doesn't pay the farmer for his grain or his honey. He doesn't pay the money lender. They are angry and threaten him. Why would we worry about his mistakes? We are not his keepers, I replied thoughtlessly. Foolish boy, you don't understand. He gave the money lender your title to secure a loan. Under the law, he can claim you and sell you. I don't know what to do. He is a good master. Why? Or why should such trouble come upon him? Swasti's fears were not groundless. While I was doing the baking next morning, the moneylender returned with a man he called Sassy. This man looked me over and said, I would do. The moneylender didn't wait for my master to return but told Swasti to tell him he had taken me. With only the robe on my back and the purse of pennies hanging safely from my belt, I was hurried away from the unfinished baking. I was whirled away from the hopes and dreams just like a hurricane snatches the tree from the forest and throws it into the surging sea. Again, a gaming house and barley beer had caused me disaster. Sassy was a blunt, gruff man. As he led across the city, I told him about the good work I had been doing for Nana Nade and said I hoped to do good work for him. His reply offered me no encouragement. I don't like this work. My master doesn't like it. The king has told him to send me to build a section of the Grand Canal. Master tells Sassy to buy more slaves, work hard and finish quick. Bah! How can any man finish a big job quick? Picture a desert without a tree, just low shrubs and the sun burning with such fury, and the water in our barrels becomes so hot we could barely drink. Then picture rows of men going down into the deep excavation and lugging heavy baskets of dirt up soft, dusty trails from daylight until dark. Picture food being served in open troughs from which we helped ourselves like swine. We had no tents, no straw for beds. That was the situation I found myself. I buried my purse in a marked spot, wondering if I would ever dig it up again. At first I worked with good will, but as the months dragged on, I felt my spirit breaking. Then the heat fever took hold of my weary body. I lost my appetite and could barely eat the mutton and vegetables. At night I would toss and turn in unhappy sleeplessness. In my misery, I wondered if Zabado had the right plan after all, to shirk and keep his back from being broken in work. Then I remembered the last time I saw him and knew his plan was not good. I thought of Pirate with his bitterness and wondered if it might just be as good to fight and kill. The memory of his bleeding body reminded me that his plan was also useless. Then I remembered my last sight of Megiddo. His hands were deeply calloused from hard work, but his heart was light and there was happiness on his face. He had the best plan, but I was just as willing to work as Megiddo. He could not have worked harder than me. Why did my work bring me happiness and success? Was it work that brought Megiddo happiness, or was happiness and success merely in the laps of the gods? Was I supposed to work the rest of my life without getting what I wanted, without happiness and success? All of these questions were jumbled in my mind, and I had no answer. I was sorely confused. Several days later, when it seemed that I was at the end of my endurance and my questions still unanswered, Sassy sent for me. A messenger had come from my master to take me back to Babylon. I dug up my precious wallet, wrapped myself in the tattered remnants of my robe, and was on my way. As we rode, the same thoughts of a hurricane whirling me here and there kept racing through my feverish brain. It seemed to be living the weird words of a chant in my native town of Harun, besetting a man like a whirlwind, driving him like a storm, whose course no one can follow, whose destiny no one can foretell. Was I destined to be punished forever for some reason I didn't even know about? What new miseries and disappointments were waiting for me? When we rode to the courtyard of my master's house, imagine my surprise when I saw Arad Gula waiting for me. He helped me down and hugged like a long-lost brother. As we went on our way, I would have followed him as a slave would follow his master, but he would not allow me to. He put his arm around me, saying, "I searched everywhere for you." When I had almost given up hope, I met Swasti, who told me about the money lender, who directed me to your noble owner. A hard bargain he drove and made me pay an outrageous price, but you are worth it. Your philosophy and your enterprise have been my inspiration for this new success. Megiddo's philosophy, not mine, I interrupted. Megiddo and yours. Thanks to you both, we are going to Damascus, and I need you for my partner. See, he exclaimed, in 1 minute you will be a free man. He pulled out the clay tablet carrying my title from beneath his robe. Then he raised it above his head and held it into the air. It broke into 100 pieces on the cobblestones. With glee, he stamped on the fragments until they were dust. Tears of gratitude filled my eyes. I knew I was the luckiest man in Babylon. Work, you see, in the time of my greatest distress, did prove to be my best friend. My willingness to work enabled me to escape from being sold to join the slave gangs on the walls. It also impressed your grandfather so much he selected me for his partner. Then Hadan Gula asked, was work my grandfather's secret key to the golden shekels? It was the only key he had when I first knew him. Sharunada replied, your grandfather enjoyed working. The gods appreciated his efforts and rewarded him generously. I am beginning to see, Hadangula was speaking thoughtfully. Work attracted his many friends who admired his industry and the success he brought. Work brought him the honor he enjoyed so much in Damascus. Work brought him all the things I have approved, and I thought work was only fit for slaves. Life is rich with many pleasures for men to enjoy, Sharunada commented. Each has its place. I am glad that work is not reserved for slaves. If that were the case, I would be deprived of my greatest pleasure. I enjoy many things, but nothing takes the place of work. Sharunada and Hadangula rode in the shadows of the towering walls up to the massive bronze gates of Babylon. When they approached, the gate guards jumped to attention and respectfully saluted an honored citizen. With his head held up high, Sharunada led the long caravan through the gates and up the streets of the city. I have always hoped to be a man like my grandfather, had Ngula confided to him. I never realized just what kind of man he was. This you have shown me. Now that I understand, I admire him with all the more. I admire him all the more and feel more determined to be like him. I fear that I can never repay you for giving me the true key to success. From this day forward, I will use his key. I will start humbly like he started, which fits my true station far better than jewels and fine robes. Hadangula pulled the jeweled baubles from his ears and the rings from his fingers. Then he dropped back and rode with deep respect behind the leader of the caravan. What an absolutely remarkable way to conclude one of the most influential books ever written on wealth, personal responsibility, and financial freedom. Although this final chapter appears to focus on luck, it ultimately reveals that luck is really as mysterious as we imagine. Instead, Clason gently demonstrates that what we often call luck is usually the visible reward for years of invisible preparation. One of the greatest lessons this chapter offers is that opportunity rarely announces its arrival with fanfare. More often than not, it appears quietly, disguised as difficult decisions, a calculated risk, or an uncomfortable step outside our familiar routines. The tragedy is that many people spend so much time waiting for certainty that they allow opportunity to pass by unnoticed. Later, when someone else embraces that same opportunity and succeeds, it is labeled as luck, when in reality it was courage combined with decisive action. Another powerful message woven throughout this chapter is that successful people do not necessarily receive more opportunities than anyone else. Instead, they have spent years developing themselves so that when opportunity finally appears, they are ready to recognize it. Their financial education, discipline, experience, and willingness to learn allows them to see possibilities where others see uncertainty. Preparation gives them confidence, and confidence enables them to act while others continue to hesitate. The chapter also reminds us that hesitation can become one of the greatest thieves of success. Every one of us has experienced moments where we delayed making a decision because we wanted just a little more information, a little more certainty, or simply the reassurance that everything would work out perfectly. Yet life rarely offers perfect conditions. Progress belongs to those who are willing to make thoughtful decisions despite uncertainty, understanding that waiting forever guarantees only one outcome, that nothing changes. When we reflect on the entire journey through Babylon, it becomes clear that every lesson we learned has been quietly preparing us for this final message. Saving consistently creates options. Investing wisely creates growth. Seeking knowledge builds confidence. Developing discipline strengthens character. Increasing our skills expands our opportunities. Together, these habits create a life that others often mistake for extraordinary good fortune. The truth is that luck frequently arrives wearing the clothes of preparation. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that we should stop hoping life will become easier before we begin taking action. Instead, we should focus on becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable so that when opportunity finally appears, we are ready to embrace it without any hesitation. Fortune does not simply favor the bold, It favors those whose courage is supported by preparation and whose preparation is sustained by consistent action. So, as we reach the end of The Richest Man in Babylon, it is worth remembering that this book has never really been about money alone. It has always been about character. Wealth is simply one of the many rewards that naturally follow discipline, responsibility, patience, integrity, and continuous learning. Those qualities enrich every area of our lives, whether we measure success in financial terms, relationships, personal fulfillment, or the legacy we leave behind. The ancient city of Babylon may have disappeared thousands of years ago, yet the wisdom preserved within its stories remains as relevant today as it was when the lessons were first imagined. Technology has transformed the world, economies have risen and fallen, and societies have evolved, but human nature remains remarkably unchanged. We still face the same temptations to spend before we save, to delay instead of acting, to fear risk instead of preparing wisely, and to hope for fortune instead of building the habits that attract it. My hope is that this series has inspired you not only to enjoy these stories but also apply them. Even the smallest lesson consistently practiced has the power to change the course of a lifetime. Knowledge becomes valuable only when it influences your decisions, and our decisions ultimately shape the future we create for ourselves. So, if you have enjoyed today's reading and found value in this incredible journey through The Richest Man in Babylon, please consider supporting Michael Reads by subscribing, leaving a like, and sharing this live stream with someone who would benefit from these timeless principles. Every new member of this community helps preserve the wisdom contained within these extraordinary books, ensuring that future generations can continue to learn from them just as we have. Thank you for reading alongside me throughout this entire journey. Whether you've been here from chapter 1 or you have recently joined us, I truly appreciate your time, your support, and your commitment to personal growth. Remember that knowledge alone changes very little. It is consistent application of that knowledge that transforms lives. So take one lesson from tonight's reading, put it into practice, and allow it to become another step towards the future you're working to create. I will be announcing a new book. In fact, I will put in my community hub suggestions for books that you feel I should do next. So turn your notifications on for that. But until our next book, continue seeking wisdom, continue investing in yourself, and continue becoming the person your future deserves. Ancient wisdom, modern wealth, lifelong growth, one chapter at a time. I am Michael. This is Michael Reads, and I'll see you in the next live stream, which will just be a small, short little close to the book. Thank you for joining me. You could have been anywhere else, and I appreciate you. Take care. Bye bye.